The Ghost in the Kitchen. I took money from my brother's killer to build my name, is Elias Vance. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, a city where the past refuses to stay buried. For the last 5 years, the ghost of my younger brother Caleb has been haunting my life. Caleb was an investigative journalist who was looking into the shady real estate deals surrounding the French Quarter's Historic Preservation Board. He got too close to a truth that someone decided needed to stay buried, and 5 years ago he was found dead in a suspicious accidental fire at his apartment. The fire was ruled an accident. I know it wasn't. Caleb was careful, organized, and meticulous. His death broke our family, shattered my career as an architect, and left me with a burning, impotent need for justice. My days are spent managing the wreckage of a small, struggling architectural firm, Vance Designs, and endless, fruitless meetings with a cynical private investigator who assures me Caleb's case is cold. The proposal. One sweltering Thursday afternoon, a sleek black town car pulled up outside my dilapidated office. A man stepped out immaculate in a white linen suit, a jarring contrast to the dusty street. He introduced himself as Mr. Julian Thorne, an acquisitions manager for Thorne Development Group, a massive corporate entity based in Chicago that specialized in luxury redevelopment. Thorne Development had recently bought up several prime historic properties in the French Quarter, including the old St. Jude's Convent, a massive derelict building I had always dreamed of restoring. Mr. Vance, Thorne said, his voice smooth and unsettling. Thorne Development has been following your work. Your designs are brilliant, but your firm is failing. He slid a glossy folder across my desk. We want you. We want Vance Designs to be the lead architect on our flagship project, converting the St. Jude's Convent into the most exclusive high-end culinary institute in the South, the Thorne Culinary Academy. I stared at the rendering. The project was magnificent, a $50 million restoration that would put my firm on the map, grant me unlimited creative freedom, and allow me to save a landmark. The fee is generous, Mr. Vance. Thorne continued, seeing my hesitation. A $5 million initial payment with full control over the design aesthetic. You can finally build something that will define your career. The shiver of recognition. The project was a godsend, a lifeline out of my grief and debt. But as I looked at the detailed financial documents in the folder, a name stood out among the corporate signatories: Victor Thorne, chairman and CEO of Thorne Development Group. Victor Thorne. The name instantly connected to a piece of Caleb's research, a grainy photograph of a powerful, shadowy figure who was using shell corporations to secretly acquire historic New Orleans properties. Caleb's notes had tagged him as the prime suspect in a massive property fraud scheme that threatened to displace hundreds of local residents. And then the cold, terrible realization hit me. Caleb's fire, the accidental death, had happened just 2 weeks after he had submitted his findings on Victor Thorne to his editor. Victor Thorne wasn't just a corporate shark. He was the man Caleb had identified as the central figure in the web of corruption that I believed led directly to his death. Victor Thorne was my brother's killer. The choice. I felt a paralyzing wave of nausea followed by a rush of cold, clinical clarity. Julian Thorne noticed my reaction. Is there a problem, Mr. Vance? Is the money insufficient? No. I managed my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. The project is overwhelming. It's perfect. He smiled, a practiced, empty corporate gesture. Excellent. We need you to sign the preliminary agreement now. I picked up the pen. My options were brutally simple. 1. Refuse the offer. Sink back into debt and despair and continue my fruitless search for justice with no resources. 2. Accept the offer. Take the $5 million gain, full access to the inner workings of Thorne Development, and use my position as lead architect to expose Victor Thorne from the inside. If I took his money, I would be collaborating with my brother's killer, but I would also gain the resources, access, and cover I needed to finally prove what happened to Caleb. I signed the contract. The blueprint of vengeance. Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance, Julian Thorne said, shaking my hand. Your first official site visit is tomorrow morning. You will meet with the design team at St. Jude's. As the black car disappeared, I looked at the pristine, glossy rendering of the Thorne Culinary Academy. It was beautiful, but to me it was now a facade, a magnificent cover for a structure built on lies and blood. I opened my laptop and pulled up Caleb's encrypted research files. I had accepted the money, but I wouldn't build Thorne's Culinary Academy. I would build a trap. The St. Jude's Convent was magnificent in its ruin. The massive Gothic structure with its decaying marble and shattered stained glass stood like a defiant monument to the past. This was where the Thorne Culinary Academy would rise, funded by the blood money of Victor Thorne. I met the design team in the cavernous main hall. Julian Thorne, the acquisitions manager, was already there, meticulously reviewing blueprints. He introduced me to my two primary collaborators. Sarah Chen, a sharp, cynical structural engineer from Chicago, tasked with ensuring the 150-year-old convent didn't collapse during the conversion. Dr. Elena Rossi, a world-renowned culinary consultant hired to design the cutting-edge commercial kitchens and lecture halls. "Welcome to the beginning, Elias," Julian said, offering a hand that felt cold and transactional. "The timeline is aggressive. We break ground in 3 months. Your first task is the master plan. Show us how you'll preserve the history while delivering a luxury product." I presented my initial concept, focusing on retaining the architectural integrity of the FOD, but gutting the interior for modern infrastructure. My passion was genuine. I wanted to save the building, but now the design had a dual purpose. I needed to establish deep access points into the building's core structure and utility systems. "The challenge is the sub-basement," I explained, pointing to the foundation on the blueprint. "The original foundations are unstable due to the New Orleans water table. We'll need extensive deep-bore sampling and reinforcement. We'll also need a centralized utility core running from the sub-basement to the roof, handling all data power and ventilation." Julian frowned. "The sub-basement is expensive. Can we avoid it?" "Absolutely not. It's structural integrity, Mr. Thorne. Unless you want the $50 million building to sink into the swamp," I countered, using genuine architectural necessity as a cover for my true intentions. Julian reluctantly agreed, giving me the authorization to proceed with the sub-basement access and the centralized utility core. Caleb's code. Back in my office, I activated the encrypted research on my laptop. Caleb's files weren't just notes. They contained intricate information about Victor Thorne's corporate network. Caleb had been a coder before he was a journalist, and he had hidden his most sensitive findings in a piece of custom forensic accounting software that looked like a simple video game. I needed to access Thorne Development's core internal network. My architectural blueprints weren't for a building. They were for a covert data conduit. I pulled up the master design for the utility core. I meticulously designed a network trench that would run through the deepest, most inaccessible parts of the convent, the very structure I had just won authorization to build. Hidden within the trench, I planned to install a specialized unpowered fiber optic line that would bypass the Thorne network's physical security layers. The line would run from the proposed server room on the second floor down through the sub-basement and terminate in a secluded external access point near the old cemetery wall. This was the core of my trap, using my role as lead architect to create a backdoor network link straight into the heart of Thorne Development's operation at St. Jude's. The first betrayal. My first big ethical test arrived 2 days later. Julian Thorne handed me the initial construction budget. "We need to cut the budget by 10% on the finishings," Julian instructed. "Victor Thorne wants those savings applied immediately." I knew where the cuts would land the local subcontractors and artisans I had intended to hire. Thorne Development was famous for using cheap non-union labor from out-of-stadia practice that had driven local craftspeople out of business. Caleb had documented this predatory behavior extensively. I had to choose: uphold my promise to my community and expose my motives, or silently accept the cuts and secure my access. I pushed back subtly. "The historic tax credits require high-quality local craftsmanship, Julian. Cutting here jeopardizes the funding." Julian didn't blink. "Then you find the cuts in the systems, Elias. We're an academy, not a museum. The project moves forward regardless of tax credits." I conceded, my stomach twisting with guilt. I approved the budget cuts, firing the initial local vendors and replacing them with Thorne's preferred cheap subcontractors. The foundation of my vengeance was built on my first betrayal of my community, the silent warning. Late that night, I was back at the convent, surveying the massive empty structure alone. I needed to solidify the plans for the network trench. As I walked through the dusty sub-basement, I noticed a detail I hadn't seen before. Etched into the exposed foundation stone, hidden behind a patch of crumbling plaster, was a symbol. It was a crude drawing of a broken compass, the exact image Caleb and I had used as our childhood secret signature. A cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just old masonry. The etching was fresh. I quickly photographed the symbol. Was this Caleb's ghost? Or had someone else been here? Someone who knew my brother's code and was sending a warning? I realized that Victor Thorne might not just be a killer. He might be a player in a deeper, more dangerous game, and someone else was watching me build his academy. The stakes had just doubled. I wasn't just building a network for revenge. I was walking into an existing battlefield. The $5 million initial payment from Thorne Development sat in a special compartmentalized bank account. It was blood money, and I treated it like toxic waste to be used only for neutralizing the source of the poison. The first action was to hire the best, most discreet forensic investigator I could find, Lena Santos. She operated out of a small office in Metairie, specializing in complex corporate fraud. I met her at a dimly lit coffee shop, pushing a flash drive across the table. This drive contains the full corporate structure of Thorn Development, the acquisition shell companies, and Caleb's original notes on Victor Thorn. I told her. I need you to find the connection between Thorn and the fire 5 years ago. I need the truth, and I need it untraceable. Lena, whose eyes were sharp and tired, didn't flinch. 5 million buys a lot of silence, Mr. Vance. What do I tell Victor Thorn when he inevitably asks who is sniffing around his balance sheets? Tell him nothing. Use the shell companies I established using my architectural fee. If the truth surfaces, it surfaces through me, not you. Your job is to find the physical evidence that links Victor Thorn to the property acquisitions Caleb was investigating. And your fee, the satisfaction of justice, and a small retainer from the $5 million. Lena took the drive. I'll start digging in the foundations, Elias. Hope you've built a solid enough cover story. Laying the trap. Construction began on the St. Jude's sub-basement. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ancient decay. I personally supervised the installation of the centralized utility core, the massive vertical trench designed to house all the Academy's data and power lines. The trench had to be deeper than necessary to avoid the high water table I insisted to Julian. In reality, the depth was to hide my secret. Working late one evening after the Thorn subcontractors had left, I put on my hard hat and descended into the muddy, newly reinforced sub-basement. I was alone, relying only on the flickering construction lights. I had ordered a special unshielded fiber optic cable, just 100 meters delivered to my home office. Now I unspooled it, running the fragile line through the pre-installed oversized conduit. This was the hidden trench, the secret data lifeline that would connect my laptop to the Academy's main server room on the second floor, bypassing all firewalls and security checks. It was excruciatingly slow work. I had to ensure the fiber line was perfectly masked by the thick, legitimate bundles of electrical conduit. I was installing the physical manifestation of my revenge, a direct line into the killer's castle, the design scrutiny. I was just securing the final section of the covert line when Julian Thorn appeared at the edge of the sub-basement trench. Elias, what are you doing down here? Shouldn't that be a foreman's job? Julian's voice was sharp, echoing off the concrete. I scrambled out of the trench, heart hammering against my ribs. I had been caught in the act. Ah, Julian, just checking the structural integrity. I lied smoothly, wiping mud from my gloves. The conduit specifications were excessive. We're dealing with highly sensitive culinary technology, up-top induction ranges, specialized air filtration. The design requires a trench 20% deeper than code for proper thermal separation. Julian was skeptical. He pulled out the blueprints and pointed to the depth specifications. This trench is costing us an extra $2.5 million, Elias. Victor Thorn is concerned about the over-engineering. He wants reassurance that you're focused on the Academy's needs, not personal architectural ambitions. The pressure was intense. This was Victor Thorn speaking through Julian, testing my loyalty. The ambition is the Academy, Julian, I said, meeting his gaze. We are preserving a 150-year-old structure. The deeper trench guarantees structural integrity and prevents electromagnetic interference with the high-end server room. If the foundation fails, Victor Thorn's investment fails. I'm protecting his investment. My certainty, buttressed by genuine technical jargon, seemed to settle Julian. He nodded slowly. Very well, but no more unscheduled late-night inspections. The site is locked down after 6 p.m. The new player. I had bought myself time, but the close call confirmed that Victor Thorn was watching every cubic inch of the construction. The next morning, a small, crudely wrapped package was left on the hood of my car. It was addressed only to Elias. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a piece of cheap laminated wood, a small kitchen cutting board. Etched deeply into the center of the board was the broken compass symbol. But this time there was an addition, a single typed note tacked onto the board. The ghost in the kitchen knows the ingredients. Don't burn the house down again. The message was terrifyingly specific. The ghost in the kitchen referred to Caleb, the investigative journalist who was killed in a fire. And don't burn the house down again suggested the sender was either involved in the original fire or knew that I was collaborating with the person who caused it. This wasn't a warning from Thorn. Thorn wanted the project finished. This was a message from the person who etched the broken compass in the foundation, an unseen player who knew Caleb's history, my motives, and the dark truth about the fire. I was no longer alone in my quest for vengeance. I had an unknown ally, or an even more dangerous adversary watching me build the trap. The cryptic note. The ghost in the kitchen knows the ingredients. Don't burn the house down again. Changed everything. I was no longer just laying a trap for Victor Thorne. I was performing on a stage set by an unknown audience. I called Lena Santos, my forensic investigator. I didn't tell her about the broken compass or the note, just that the situation was escalating rapidly, and I needed results from her financial dive into Thorne development. "I've hit the main wall, Elias," Lena reported. "Victor Thorne's personal finances are shielded by 3 layers of offshore shell companies. It's a masterpiece of legal laundering. But I did find one interesting anomaly: a series of 6-figure payments made to a single local LLC, NOLA Preservation Consulting. What is that? It's registered under a residential address in the Garden District. It's a consulting firm, but its only recorded service is historic zoning mediation for properties that Thorne Development later acquires. The payments stopped exactly 5 years ago, the same month Caleb died. Lena confirmed my deepest suspicion: this consulting firm was likely the payoff conduit for the local official or power broker who smoothed the way for Thorne's illegal acquisitions and possibly covered up Caleb's murder. "Get me the name of the owner of that LLC," I ordered. The data launch. With the external investigation underway, I moved to activate my internal trap. My hidden fiber optic line, the hidden trench, was complete, running from the server room on the 2nd floor down to my secret external access point near the cemetery wall. I returned to my office and pulled out the specialized equipment I had purchased with Thorne's money: a custom-built network interface device designed to mimic a temperature sensor and a hardened military-grade router. The following morning, I went to the St. Jude site, feigning an inspection of the utility core on the 2nd floor. I quickly spliced the concealed fiber optic line into the main data conduit, a simple physical connection that wouldn't trip network security flags. I made the connection, left the building, and drove to the cemetery wall. I plugged the termination of the fiber line into the network interface device, and then into my laptop. The simple green light flashed, confirming the physical link. I was in. I had bypassed the $1 million firewall. I launched Caleb's encrypted forensic accounting software, the video game that was really a network scanner. It began to quietly map Thorne Development's internal server structure. I was the ghost in their machine, the culinary spy. Later that afternoon, I met with Dr. Elena Rossi, the culinary consultant. She was highly technical, focused on the seamless integration of industrial kitchens. We were reviewing the final equipment list. Elena leaned in, her voice low. "I'm concerned about the ventilation system in the main demo kitchen, Elias. You've specified a massive high-capacity filtration unit far beyond code for a gas range setup. It's an engineer's dream, but it's wildly expensive." I explained my architectural reasoning. "Historic buildings require over-engineering, Elena. We need a system that can manage smoke, heat, and potential chemical residue without stressing the old structure." Elena looked at me, her expression shrewd. "Chemical residue, Elias. This is a culinary school, not a chemistry lab. That filtration unit is designed to handle chlorine gas or nerve agents. It's the kind of system you install in a secret server room to protect sensitive hardware from contamination, not for making souffles." Her suspicion was sharp, logical, and dangerously accurate. I had designed the ventilation unit to be part of the trap, a way to quickly vent contaminants if I needed to erase evidence from the server room. "It's about future-proofing, Dr. Rossi," I insisted, maintaining my composure. "Thorne Development doesn't build for tomorrow. They build for the next century." Elena paused, then she gave me a slow, knowing smile. "Well, I certainly hope the Academy's chefs only plan on cooking delicious things, Elias. Because with that system, they could cook up a lot more than a 4-course meal." She knew I was lying. She wasn't just a consultant. She was a highly trained professional who had spotted the military-grade detail in my design. I now had 2 people, Elena and the broken compass sender, who were aware of the dangerous anomalies in the Academy's blueprint. Lena's discovery. That evening, as I monitored the network scan, Lena Santos called me. Her voice was taut with discovery. "I found the owner of NOLA Preservation Consulting," Lena stated. "The LLC is owned by a man named Jerome Finch. He's not a city councilman or an official. He's a former fire department chief who retired 5 years ago, the same month Caleb died." My breath caught. A fire chief. Why was Victor Thorne paying a former fire chief through a consulting firm? Finch was the chief who signed off on the official report for Caleb's apartment fire, Lena stated, her voice lowering. He ruled it an accidental electrical fault. And now he's rich thanks to Victor Thorne. The last piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. Thorne provided the motive and the money. The fire chief provided the cover-up. My brother's death was officially a paid-for lie. I looked at the network scanner on my laptop. It was now fully connected to the Thorne server. I had the means to expose the killer, and now I had the identity of the accomplice. I was ready to move from architect to executioner. The discovery that Jerome Finch, the former fire chief, was the man who signed off on Caleb's accidental death report was the validation I needed. Finch was the key to unlocking Victor Thorne's involvement. I instructed Lena Santos to focus her investigation on Finch's communications from 5 years ago, specifically searching for any contact logs with Thorne's known shell corporations. I needed undeniable evidence of the payoff. My professional life became a tightrope walk. I had to continue presenting the face of the dedicated architect while secretly preparing to use the Thorne Culinary Academy as my base of operations. The architect's alibi. Julian Thorne called me into his temporary office at the convent for a surprise meeting. Elias Victor Thorne is flying down from Chicago next week for a site inspection and a press conference, Julian announced. He wants the demolition phase complete and the sub-basement ready for the foundation pour. He also wants you to prepare a detailed presentation on the centralized utility core. He needs to know why it's so expensive. This was the moment of maximum danger. Victor Thorne was coming to inspect the very structure I had designed as his undoing. I'll prepare the presentation, I agreed, feigning enthusiasm. But the utility core is non-negotiable. It's the lifeblood of the academy. Julian then handed me a temporary security pass, granting me 24-hour access to the site during the demolition phase. Victor wants you on site at all hours. Your constant supervision ensures no delays. The pass was a double-edged sword. It granted me the access I needed for my trap, but it also put me directly in Victor Thorne's orbit, confronting the fire chief. I used my access to Finch's residential address provided by Lena. Finch lived in a beautiful but isolated historic home in the Garden District. I drove there late that night, fueled by 5 years of simmering rage. I found Finch sitting on his porch, a wealthy man enjoying his ill-gotten retirement. I walked up the steps and stood over him. "Mr. Finch, I'm Elias Vance, Caleb Vance's brother." Finch's face, initially placid, instantly drained of color. He stood up, towering over me, his hand moving toward the phone. "Get off my property. I don't know who you are." "You know who I am. You know Caleb. You ruled his death an accidental electrical fire 5 years ago," I pressed. "And now you're enjoying your retirement thanks to Victor Thorne and NOLA Preservation Consulting." "That was a professional assessment, Mr. Vance. The evidence was clear. The evidence was paid for." I cut him off, leaning closer. "I know Victor Thorne paid you off to cover up the murder and smooth his property acquisitions. You signed the document that allowed his corporate empire to rise on my brother's grave." Finch's facade crumbled. He looked terrified. "It wasn't murder, Elias. It was a message. They wanted the building he was investigating. They didn't mean to." He clamped his mouth shut, realizing his mistake. "They didn't mean to what Finch kill him or just silence him." I grabbed his arm hard. "I'm working with Victor Thorne now. I'm the lead architect on his academy. If you don't tell me what happened, I will expose you to the FBI, and I will ensure Victor Thorne cuts you off and you lose everything. You tell me how it went down." Sweating and shaking, Finch finally broke. He confirmed that Victor Thorne's acquisition team needed the building Caleb was researching. They sent a crew to intimidate Caleb and stage a small fire to destroy the evidence. The fire spread too fast. Finch was paid a substantial sum to certify the death as accidental and destroy the investigation logs. "Victor Thorne didn't pull the trigger, Elias." Finch whispered, tears in his eyes. "But he gave the order. He gave the order to burn the truth. The price of the deal." I left Finch with a warning: disappear or face exposure. I had my confirmation, but I still needed the electronic paper trail. I returned to my office and logged into my hidden network link at St. Jude's. The network scan was complete. I now had the full map of Thorne Development servers. I located the main financial records server and began a deep dive sweep for any communication logs tied to Jerome Finch. As the data flowed, Lena called, her voice urgent. "Elias, I found the paper trail. A series of wire transfers totaling $800,000 from Thorne's offshore LLC to Finch's consulting firm. The metadata shows the transfers were authorized by Victor Thorne's private terminal. The digital evidence was secured. I had the proof of the payoff, the final ingredient I needed for my vengeance. But as I looked at the undeniable evidence, I felt hollow, not victorious. I had just traded the respect of my community, my ethical boundaries, and 5 years of my life to collaborate with a killer, all to confirm what I already knew: my brother was murdered for a property deal. The only way to justify the cost was to destroy Victor Thorne completely. The day Victor Thorne arrived at the St. Jude's convent site, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Thorne landed by private helicopter on a secured pad near the site, a display of wealth that was both arrogant and intimidating. He was exactly as I had imagined from the grainy photographs: a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that assessed every asset, human or architectural, with cold calculation. He exuded the lethal confidence of someone who had never faced consequence. Julian Thorne, his nephew and acquisitions manager, met him with deference. Julian shot me a look of warning. Don't screw this up. Mr. Vance, Victor said, extending a hand that I was forced to shake. His grip was surprisingly firm. I hear you're building me a legacy. Show me why I'm spending $50 million on an old ruin. The tour and the scrutiny. I led Victor Thorne on a tour highlighting the preservation efforts and the complex structural engineering. I was playing the role of the dedicated architect detailing the beauty of the conversion while secretly focusing on the path to my trap. Victor was not interested in aesthetics. He was interested in security and cost. This is the heart of the academy, I explained as we entered the second floor, a designated area for the main server room. All digital operations, from student records to the Thorne Development Group's proprietary trading software, will be routed through this central hub. And the security? Victor asked, glancing at the reinforced walls I had specified. Bank grade, but the most complex part is the utility core, I said, leading him to the massive vertical trench running down to the sub-basement. It handles power data and the specialized ventilation. We needed it massive and deep to manage all the systems. Victor stopped, his attention focused entirely on the trench. Julian expressed concern about the expense of this trench, Mr. Vance. It seems unnecessarily large. It's about data integrity, Mr. Thorne, I insisted, hitting him with genuine technical jargon. The specialized V-core filtration unit is necessary to prevent environmental contamination from the New Orleans humidity from reaching the sensitive data lines. Without it, your high-speed trading servers face catastrophic failure. My explanation held water, but Victor's gaze was unsettlingly penetrating. You're a brilliant architect, Mr. Vance, Victor said, his voice flat. But architects should stick to bricks and mortar. Leave the corporate security to my team. The encounter with the ghost. As we were leaving the site, a delivery van pulled up a catering service for the press conference scheduled later that afternoon. A young woman jumped out unloading trays of food. She wore a catering apron, but when she looked up, my blood ran cold. It was Dr. Elena Rossi, the culinary consultant. She was here disguised as a caterer just hours before Victor Thorne's press conference. She didn't acknowledge me professionally. She walked past, and as she did, she spoke only 3 words directed at Victor Thorne, but loud enough for me to hear. The ghost sends greetings. Victor Thorne stopped dead in his tracks. His face, usually granite, fractured into a brief flash of pure alarm. He instantly grabbed Julian's arm and barked, "Who is that woman? Get security to check every vehicle." Elena the caterer was already gone, disappearing into the crowd of workers. Victor Thorne was visibly shaken. The name Ghost was clearly a warning he understood, confirming that the mysterious player who had left me the broken compass note was now making direct contact with him. The interrogation. Victor immediately canceled the press conference and demanded an unscheduled meeting in the site office. He cornered me, Julian, and the structural engineer Sarah Chen. The project is compromised, Victor stated, his voice low and dangerous. That woman knew too much. Vance, you're the last person hired. What do you know about the ghost? Julian instantly turned on me. He was asking too many questions about the sub-basement, Victor. He insisted on the excessive depth and the strange filtration system. I had to sell the lie completely. I know nothing of any ghost, Mr. Thorne. I am an architect. But if you are talking about sabotage, then I designed the V-core filtration unit to protect your servers from exactly this kind of breach, the kind that might involve airborne toxins or surveillance devices. Victor stared at me, calculating whether I was a dangerous idiot or a dangerous enemy. Fine, Victor decided. We will find the ghost. In the meantime, the security of the server room is paramount. I am moving our proprietary trading hardware to the St. Jude site tonight. I want you to personally oversee the installation, Elias. You will be the only Vance Designs employee allowed near that room. Your loyalty is now being tested. Victor Thorne was bringing his most valuable and sensitive assets into the very trap I had built. He was testing my loyalty by forcing me to guard the evidence I was trying to steal. The test of loyalty. That night, under heavy security, a team from Chicago unloaded crates of server equipment. Victor Thorne watched me intensely as I directed the placement of the hardware in the second-floor server room. As I worked, I discreetly placed a tiny network tap into the disguised network interface I had spliced into the utility core earlier that day. This tap would passively draw all data traffic from the main server without alerting the system. The physical connection was active. I was now one step away from launching Caleb's forensic accounting software directly into Victor Thorne's live trading network. As Victor turned to leave, he stopped by the server rack I had just set up. "You know, Elias," Victor murmured, placing a hand on the cool metal. "Your brother was a brilliant young man. A tragedy. If he had focused his talents on building something instead of trying to tear things down, he might still be alive. You have a chance to build, Elias." Don't waste it on tearing things down." His words, veiled in false mentorship, were a direct confession and a threat. He knew exactly who I was, and he was daring me to act. After Victor Thorne's menacing warning, the St. Jude's site transformed into a fortress. Victor left Chicago's core trading servers in place and assigned a skeletal crew of corporate security to the building, effectively using the convent as an offshore data center. My temporary 24-hour access pass was revoked. I was now only permitted on site from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., under the strict supervision of Julian Thorne. Victor was making sure I couldn't access the server room, the very room where I had successfully installed my hidden network tap. I called Lena Santos. "The physical evidence of the payoff is secured, but I need the digital footprint of the murder, the communication logs between Victor Thorne and the men who set the fire. I need to get back into that server room and launch Caleb's forensic software." "Victor Thorne is not going to let you near that utility core," Lena warned. "You need a distraction so massive that it pulls every security eye away from the server room." The architect's sabotage. The one person who could provide cover was Sarah Chen, the structural engineer. She was meticulous, highly ethical, and deeply concerned about the aggressive demolition schedule. I created a fake geological report detailing an immediate critical threat to the building's foundation due to the aggressive deep-bore drilling near the original load-bearing walls. The report, designed to look like a desperate late-night discovery, predicted a catastrophic localized structural collapse within 48 hours. I anonymously emailed the report to Sarah. The next morning, Sarah confronted Julian Thorne, her face pale with panic. "Julian, we have to stop the drilling immediately. The foundation is compromised near the east wing load-bearing pillar. If we continue, the entire structure could fail." Julian was furious but couldn't dismiss Sarah's professional panic. They had to send the entire security detail and most of the site managers to the sub-basement to assess the structural emergency. The distraction was perfect. The server room was momentarily unguarded. The launch. I used the confusion to slip away. I raced to the utility core access panel near the server room. The small metal panel, which I had specified with a generic contractor key, yielded instantly. I was in the utility core, standing beside the massive humming server rack I had helped install. I reached through the mess of wires and found the discrete network tap I had planted days earlier. I connected my laptop hidden inside a rolled-up set of blueprints to the tap. I launched Caleb's specialized software, Ghost Protocol. The program was designed to cut through Thorne's corporate security layers and specifically target communications metadata, searching for keywords like Caleb, fire, and NOLA preservation. The progress bar on the screen moved agonizingly slow. I was downloading the communications of a multi-billion-dollar corporate entity, the ghost in the kitchen. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed from the floor above. Someone else was in the building. I yanked my laptop away, but the data transfer was only 60% complete. I couldn't stop it now. The server room door opened not by security, but by Dr. Elena Rossi. She was no longer in catering uniform, but in dark, practical clothes, carrying a tool bag. "Elena, what are you doing here?" I demanded. "The same thing you are," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She walked past me straight to the massive, highly technical V-core filtration unit I had designed, the system designed to vent contaminants. "I knew that ventilation unit wasn't for cooking, Elias," Elena said, her back to me as she worked quickly on the filtration panel. "I didn't know why until the press reported your brother's name." "You know Caleb?" Elena stopped working and turned her eyes dark with grief and resolve. "Caleb was my fiancé, Elias. We were supposed to get married a month after he died. He used the code name, the Ghost in the Kitchen, because we shared this passion designing food spaces. When Victor Thorne hired me to build his academy, I realized he was building it on Caleb's grave." Elena Rossi was the ghost in the kitchen, the one who left the warnings. "I came here to do what you are doing," Elena continued. "But I realized you designed this system as a failsafe. You wanted to destroy the evidence if you couldn't steal it." She pointed to the active filtration unit. "You designed this system to purge air contaminants. I'm modifying the intake valve to ingest a localized EMP pulse. If Thorne's security finds you, I will trigger it. It will fry every server in this room and wipe the data clean. It's the ultimate scorched earth defense." Elena had just given me the ultimate weapon and the final moral dilemma. I was now working with my brother's fiancé, and she was willing to destroy the very evidence I needed just to prevent it from falling into Thorne's hands. The discovery and the escape. "I need 5 more minutes, Elena. The data is almost complete." "You have 2, she replied, finishing her modification and looking toward the door. "Julian is coming back up." Sarah realized the geological report was a fake. I watched the progress bar crawl to 98%. The door handle began to rattle violently. Access denied. This area is compromised. Julian, get out of there. That core is unstable. Julian was trying to override the lock. 99%. 100%. Download complete. I snatched the laptop, tore out the network tap, and shoved the entire package back into the blueprint tube. Go. Use the utility core access. I will stay and delay him. Elena pushed me toward the utility core access panel. Elena, he knows who you are. He knows you're Caleb's fiancé. No, he doesn't. Elena said, a grim smile touching her lips. I kept that part of my life separate. Now go. Justice needs the data, Elias. Not the fire. I hesitated for only a second, then slipped back into the tight confines of the utility core, leaving the true ghost in the kitchen to face the man who killed her fiancé. I scrambled through the narrow confines of the utility core, the blueprint tube containing the laptop pressed against my chest. Below me, I could hear the muffled, furious sounds of Julian Thorne breaching the server room door, and the sudden, sharp confrontation with Elena Rossi. Who are you? What are you doing here? Julian's voice was strained, followed by a grunt of pain. Then Elena's voice calm and resolute. I'm just the consultant, Julian, and I'm here to ensure you never use this academy to cover up a murder again. A violent struggle ensued. I knew I had seconds before Julian realized I had used the core access to escape and raised the full alarm. I had to get to the external access point near the cemetery wall. I reached the bottom of the utility core where my hidden fiber optic line terminated. I tore the external panel open and dropped out into the dark, dusty sub-basement. The EMP execution. As I sprinted through the dark tunnels of the sub-basement toward my exit point, a searing white light flashed from the second floor, followed by an agonizing, high-pitched scream of overloading circuitry. Elena had triggered the EMP. The entire construction site plunged into absolute darkness. The heavy construction machinery, the temporary lights, and most importantly, Victor Thorne's servers all dead. I paused, breathing heavily in the sudden, absolute silence. Elena had sacrificed the evidence and her own freedom to protect me and the data I had managed to steal. She had chosen the scorched earth defense. My burner phone, which ran on a hardened battery, rang instantly. It was Lena Santos. Lena, it's done. I got the data, but she triggered an EMP. Thorne's servers are fried. Elias, you need to hear this. While you were in the building, I traced the broken compass symbol. It's an old symbol used by a small local group of architects and artists in the 90s, a collective that opposed corporate redevelopment. Caleb was part of it. But so was Julian Thorne's mother before she died. My blood ran cold. Julian's mother. Why would Julian's mother be involved? She was apparently the group's ethical compass. But here's the kicker. Julian Thorne didn't join Thorne Development through his father. He was adopted by Victor's brother. Julian Thorne is not Victor Thorne's biological nephew. He's an outsider, just like you. Julian Thorne wasn't just the acquisitions manager. He was someone deeply connected to the ethical past of New Orleans, and potentially Caleb. His fierce loyalty to Victor Thorne was now a massive, confusing question mark. The cemetery exit. I reached the cemetery wall exit. I plugged the laptop into an emergency power pack to check the integrity of the downloaded data. The EMP had wiped the live servers. But the data I pulled before the pulse, the communications logs, the financial metadata, and the full map of Thorne's shell corporations was intact and encrypted within Caleb's software. I had the smoking gun. Just as I prepared to climb over the wall, the silence of the night was broken by the flashing lights of police cars. They were swarming the St. Jude's site, alerted by the electrical surge and the explosion of the EMP. I had to leave the site and expose the truth immediately. The confrontation on the wire. I reached the safety of my own office. I sent the full data haul, the wire transfer records to Finch, the communication logs, and the details of Thorne's shell companies to Lena Santos, and a pre-selected investigative reporter at the New Orleans Times-Picayune. Moments later, my regular phone rang. It was an unknown number, shielded and untraceable. I answered. You should have left the kitchen alone, Elias. It was Julian Thorne. His voice was rough, choked with fury and defeat. Where is Elena Julian? She's gone. She triggered the pulse and walked out before the police arrived. She sacrificed a fortune to save your laptop, and she implicated me in the process. Now I have nothing left thanks to your little revenge mission. She didn't do it for me, Julian. She did it for Caleb. She was his fiancé, and she was right. You should have left the kitchen alone. You think this is justice? You think Victor Thorne is the end of the line? Julian scoffed. Victor is just the cleanup crew. The real power here, the person Caleb was actually investigating, is the one who controls the zoning board, the official who allowed Victor Thorne to buy those protected historic properties. Julian dropped the final devastating truth, his voice now a low, chilling whisper. Caleb was killed because he was about to expose the true ghost in this city's politics. And if you publish that data, you'll be giving the true killer the map to find you. He hung up. I stared at the data on my screen. I had focused all my vengeance on Victor Thorne, the money, the project, and the fire. But I had only exposed the middleman. The real killer, the political puppet master who orchestrated the entire scheme, was still hidden, protected by the data I was about to release. I had the choice: publish the data and avenge Caleb, or hold the data and protect myself from the real enemy. The laptop on my desk held the complete digital evidence, the financial confession of Victor Thorne. But Julian's final words echoed in my mind. Victor Thorne is just the cleanup crew. The real power here controls the zoning board. I knew that releasing the data now would expose Victor and the fire chief, Jerome Finch, but it would also instantly alert the true killer, the zoning ghost, who would then come for me and the data. I had to find the true killer first. I called Lena Santos. Lena, I need you to cross-reference the Shell Corporation names with every single vote and motion passed by the New Orleans Historic Preservation and Zoning Board in the last 5 years. I directed. Specifically look for properties Thorne acquired immediately after a contentious zoning approval. That's thousands of records, Elias, Lena protested. That's a full forensic audit. Use the $5 million. Do the audit. The man who killed Caleb is not Victor Thorne. He's a politician or a power broker who shielded Thorne for years. Elena's message news reports confirmed the arrest of Julian Thorne, who was found at the St. Jude's site after the EMP. He was charged with corporate sabotage and conspiracy. Elena Rossi had vanished without a trace, the ultimate ghost in the kitchen. Before she disappeared, she left one final subtle message for me. I received a package containing a single antique skeleton key and a hand-drawn map. The map was of a small, forgotten commercial building a few blocks from the French Quartier property that had been condemned for years. I recognized the building immediately. It was the original headquarters of the Broken Compass Collective, the anti-development architecture group Julian's mother and Caleb had belonged to. I drove to the building. It was sealed with heavy chains, but the skeleton key fit the back door lock perfectly. Inside, the space was dusty but preserved. It was a time capsule of their activism. In the center of the room was a drafting table covered with old blueprints and design sketches. Under the table, Elena had left a large antique brass compass. It was intact, not broken. Tucked into the compass was a tiny handwritten note from Elena. The broken compass isn't a symbol of defeat. It's a key. The ghost left his final true map here. Look where the north arrow is always pointing, Elias. I realized the significance. Caleb was an architect. His final damning evidence wouldn't be in a digital file. It would be in a piece of physical structure, a design, or a secret location revealed by architectural coordinates. The zoning connection. I returned to my office working feverishly with Lena. After 48 hours of intense auditing, Lena found the needle in the haystack. I found him, Elias. Only one official voted consistently to approve every single highly irregular zoning variance for Thorne's key properties. Lena announced, her voice filled with disgust. The approvals went through fast-tracked with zero opposition. The man who signed off on every deal, including the one that condemned the building Caleb was investigating, is Senator Thomas Vance. I dropped the phone. Senator Thomas Vance. My father's younger brother. My uncle. Lena, say that again. Senator Thomas Vance. The powerful head of the State Appropriations Committee who controls the entire state zoning board. He was paid an estimated $10 million in consulting fees, routed through shell companies connected to Victor Thorne. The realization was a crushing weight. The true killer wasn't some shadowy corporate lawyer. It was my own blood, my powerful uncle who had betrayed his own family for money and power. He was the one who had the authority to order Caleb's investigation shut down and certified the death. Thomas Vance was the zoning ghost. The final blueprint. I understood Elena's message now. I pulled out the original blueprints of the condo that burned the building Caleb had been investigating. I laid the blueprint next to the brass compass. The final piece of the puzzle clicked. On the condo's original plan, Caleb had sketched a tiny, almost invisible storage unit, a private sealed vault, built into the concrete foundation. The coordinates of the vault, which he had crossed out, were the exact coordinates that the north arrow of the brass compass pointed toward on the map. Caleb's last act wasn't digital. It was physical. He knew his digital files were compromised, so he hid his final, most damning evidence, likely physical documents or audio recordings, in a sealed vault in the foundation of the very building that was set to be demolished. My uncle Thomas Vance must have ordered the fire to destroy that physical vault and the evidence inside, not just Caleb, I knew what I had to do. I had to use the one thing I knew best, architecture, to expose my uncle. I opened the blueprint for the Thorn Culinary Academy. The massive over-engineered sub-basement I had insisted on building was exactly where I needed to go. It was the only secure, deep foundation structure left in the French Quarter. I would use the academy, the building funded by blood money, as the platform for the final revelation. I had the digital evidence of the payoff, the confession of the accomplice, and the identity of the true killer, my uncle, Senator Thomas Vance. Now I needed to leverage the one thing I had built with blood money, the Thorn Culinary Academy, to bring him down. The building was currently a disaster area, dark, EMP fried, and swarming with investigators trying to figure out the corporate sabotage. I slipped back onto the site, using the emergency access keys I still possessed, heading straight for the massive reinforced sub-basement. My plan was simple. Use the Academy's foundation, the deepest, most secure structure in the area, as the final stage for the revelation. The trap is sprung. I sent an anonymous encrypted message to Senator Thomas Vance. I have the contents of Caleb Vance's final vault, hidden in the foundation. I know what you did. Meet me at the sub-basement of the Thorn Culinary Academy tonight at midnight. Come alone, or the contents go to the FBI. I knew the mention of the vault would panic him. He thought he had destroyed the evidence in the fire 5 years ago. I also sent an identical message to Lena Santos, telling her to arrive 1 hour after the senator, along with the New Orleans Times-Picayune reporter, and to bring the burner laptop containing the complete digital data haul. The confrontation. At midnight, the only light in the cavernous sub-basement came from the construction safety lamps I had rigged. I stood waiting, surrounded by the towering concrete pillars of the foundation I had designed. Senator Thomas Vance arrived immaculate even in the darkness, his political poise replaced by nervous fury. "Where is it, Elias?" my uncle demanded, his eyes darting into the shadows. "The key to Caleb's vault. You destroyed your whole career for this boy." "I took the money to build a place for the truth, Uncle Thomas," I said, my voice steady. "You ordered a fire to destroy a few documents and kill a journalist. You didn't just kill Caleb, you sold out the entire city's history to corporate raiders." "Victor Thorne handled the fire, I handled the paperwork," Thomas hissed, finally dropping the pretense. "It was necessary for the city's progress. Now give me the key." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass compass, the one Elena left me. "The key isn't a key, Thomas. It's a structure," I explained, aiming my flashlight at a section of the concrete foundation. "Caleb hid his final evidence in a self-contained sealed vault right beneath the old condo. You ordered the fire to destroy the whole building, but the vault survived in the heat sealed beneath the wreckage. And I used the structural data from the fire's aftermath to pinpoint its exact location. I aimed the flashlight at a section of the foundation wall that was slightly different. It was a carefully placed removable access panel built into the new concrete of the Academy's sub-basement. I didn't steal the contents, Uncle. I moved the vault. When I was laying the foundation for this academy, I excavated the vault from the wreckage and sealed it right here into the heart of the structure I built with Victor Thorne's money. The ultimate irony, I had used the killer's funds to build the final hiding place for the evidence that would destroy him. The unveiling. Thomas Vance was paralyzed, a powerful senator caught in a physical trap designed by his own nephew. He lunged for the wall panel, but I blocked him. "You won't open it, Thomas. You'll wait," I said. Just then, the security lamps flickered and 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Lena Santos and the investigative reporter were here. Lena was holding the burner laptop, its light glowing. "What is this, Elias?" the reporter asked, holding a microphone. "This is the final structure, gentlemen," I stated, facing the camera. "On this laptop, we have the complete digital trail linking Victor Thorne and the former fire chief Jerome Finch to the murder of my brother Caleb Vance. But inside this wall, Thomas is the physical evidence that links this entire conspiracy, the corporate fraud, the property acquisitions, and the cover-up directly to Senator Thomas Vance." Thomas Vance realized he was cornered live on a video feed I was broadcasting through the emergency comms I'd built into the utility core. He made one final desperate move, tackling me toward the wall. The ghosts. Legacy. As we struggled, Thomas slammed the brass compass against the wall panel. The panel popped open, revealing a sealed metal box. Caleb's final vault. But before anyone could reach it, a high-pitched alarm began to shriek, triggered by the opening of the vault. A voice slightly distorted but recognizable echoed through the sub-basement speakers. "Attention! The ghost's final recipe requires immediate delivery." It was Elena Rossi's modified voice. She hadn't disappeared. She had rigged a final sequence timer. Suddenly, the sealed metal box, the vault hissed, and a jet of brilliant red dye exploded from the box, spraying over Thomas Vance, covering him completely, marking him with the unmistakable color of guilt. The box was empty. The physical evidence wasn't inside the vault. The vault itself was the evidence. "There's nothing here, Thomas," I said, standing over him, covered in the residual red dye. Caleb knew you'd burn the house down. He built this vault to survive the fire and draw you out. The final damning evidence audio recordings photos, they were digital. They're on the laptop. And they are now live. The reporter looked at the red-stained senator, then at the laptop screen, which now displayed the complete file transfer. Thomas Vance collapsed, the realization of his complete ruin settling over him. He was covered in the blood-red stain of his own corruption, exposed in the structure I took his partner's money to build. Epilogue. 1 year later. Thomas Vance resigned, facing immediate federal charges for corruption and conspiracy. Victor Thorne, facing the weight of the digital evidence, fled the country, but was later apprehended in Switzerland. Jerome Finch testified against both men. The Thorne Culinary Academy project was immediately halted, and the property was seized by the city. I used the last of the $5 million advance to start a non-profit foundation, the Vance Architectural Trust, dedicated to restoring historic New Orleans properties for local artists and preserving the city's integrity. I never saw Elena Rossi again. She sent me a postcard from a small village in Italia, recipe for homemade pasta, and a single sentence: "The best revenge is a dish served cold, Elias." I was financially ruined, but I was free. I had built a trap, but I ended up building a legacy for my brother. The ghost was finally at peace and the kitchen was clean.